The sun streamed through the large bay windows of the Walker household. James Walker sat at the breakfast table, the familiar aroma of freshly brewed coffee grounding him in the moment. He flipped through the newspaper, though his attention was only half there. Across the table, Valentina laughed as she passed Sophia a plate of scrambled eggs. Her laugh, once infectious, now struck James as distant, like a melody he could no longer hum along to. "So, what's the plan today, Dad? Another round of empire building?" Sophia teased, her tone equal parts admiration and sass. She was scrolling through her phone, barely glancing up. James chuckled softly, setting the paper down. "Something like that. Meetings, calls, the usual. What about you?" "School. Then maybe I'll hang out with Mia later," Sophia replied, shrugging. "Mom, can I borrow the car?" Valentina's face lit up. "Of course, sweetie. Just make sure to be back by 8. James sipped his coffee, observing the interaction. He noticed how easily Sophia gravitated towards Valentina, how often she dismissed his input in conversations. It wasn't always like this, he thought. They used to have a bond, but now it felt like he was the outsider in his own family. "Dad, you're overthinking everything again," Sophia said suddenly, as if reading his mind. She leaned back in her chair, a smirk tugging at her lips. "Mom's just busy. Not everything's a conspiracy." James raised an eyebrow. "I didn't say anything. You didn't have to. I can see it all over your face," Sophia quipped, popping a piece of toast into her mouth. Valentina chuckled lightly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "She's not wrong, James. You've been a bit tense lately." "Tense?" James repeated, setting his cup down. "I've just been noticing some changes, that's all." "What changes?" Valentina asked, her tone light, but edged with something defensive. "You've been spending a lot more time out. Yoga, charity work." He trailed off, trying to choose his words carefully. "I guess I'm just wondering if everything's okay." Valentina's laughter sounded forced this time. "Of course, everything's fine. You know how much I've wanted to get involved with the community." "Dad," Sophia interjected, rolling her eyes, "stop making it a thing. Mom's not doing anything weird." James nodded slowly, biting back the urge to press further. "Fair enough." As the conversation moved on, the uneasy feeling in his gut didn't dissipate. It only grew stronger when Anthony arrived later that morning. Anthony had been James' best friend since college, a man who'd been by his side through the highs and lows of building his business. Lately, though, Anthony seemed to be around a lot more often, almost as if he belonged in their home. "Morning, Walker family," Anthony called out, stepping into the kitchen like he owned the place. "Smells great in here." "Hey, Anthony," Valentina said, her face lighting up. "Coffee?" "Always," Anthony replied with a grin, pulling out a chair and sitting next to Valentina. James studied them for a moment. There was nothing overtly wrong with their interaction, but something about the way Valentina's smile lingered when she looked at Anthony set him on edge. "Anthony's been a real rock for me lately," James said suddenly, breaking the casual flow of conversation. "I appreciate his friendship." Anthony clapped James on the shoulder, his grip firm. "You know I've got your back, buddy. Always have, always will." Valentina's smile faltered, just for a split second, before she recovered. "Anthony's always been a good friend, hasn't he?" Her voice was bright, too bright. James' eyes flicked between the two of them. "Yeah, a good friend." Sophia, oblivious to the undercurrents, groaned. "You're all so dramatic." "I'm out of here." She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. "Don't forget about the car, Mom." "I won't," Valentina called after her. "Drive safe." Once Sophia was gone, the room fell into an awkward silence. Anthony filled his mug and leaned against the counter, sipping casually. James felt his chest tighten, the words he wanted to say clashing with the need to keep the peace. "Well," Anthony said finally, breaking the silence, "I've got to run too. Meetings, you know how it is." "Of course," James said, his voice measured. "Busy as always." Anthony gave him a mock salute and headed out the door. James watched Valentina as she gathered dishes from the table, her movements hurried and nervous. "You okay?" he asked, his tone neutral. "Why wouldn't I be?" she replied quickly, avoiding his gaze. James didn't push further. Instead, he picked up his coffee and walked to his home office, his mind racing with unspoken questions. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was slipping through his fingers, something he couldn't yet name, but knew he needed to confront. A week later, James' suspicions reached their peak. His unease had grown unbearable, gnawing at him during quiet moments. He tried to dismiss it, tried to convince himself he was imagining things, but the signs were too clear. Late one evening, after Valentina and Sophia had gone to bed, James opened his laptop and ordered a discreet security camera. It felt wrong, invasive, but he told himself it was the only way to put his mind at ease. By the time the package arrived 2 days later, he had already decided where to place it, hidden in the corner of the bedroom, where it would blend into the decor. The next day, while Valentina was out at one of her yoga classes, James installed the camera. His hands shook as he adjusted its angle, ensuring it covered the entire room. He hated himself for this, but hated the uncertainty more. As he finished, he stared at the camera for a moment, questioning if he had gone too far. But his gut told him he needed answers, no matter how much it hurt. That evening, Anthony stopped by unannounced. James had just finished cleaning up from dinner when the doorbell rang. Valentina, sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone, sprang up to answer it. "Anthony," she exclaimed, her voice brighter than usual. "What a surprise. Come in. Hope I'm not interrupting," Anthony said, stepping inside with his usual confident swagger. He carried a bottle of wine in one hand and a grin that set James' teeth on edge. "Not at all," Valentina replied, taking the bottle from him. "We were just relaxing." James emerged from the kitchen, forcing a smile. "Anthony, didn't know we had plans." "We didn't. Thought I'd drop by, see how you guys are doing," Anthony said casually, holding out his hand. James shook it, his grip firm, his eyes studying Anthony's face. "Nice of you," James replied. "Why not? Planning to stay a while?" Anthony laughed. "Only if you'll have me." Valentina was already grabbing glasses from the cabinet. "Of course, you're welcome." The three of them sat in the living room, the bottle of wine between them. Valentina poured generously, her laughter ringing out as Anthony recounted a story about an old college prank. James listened, his smile tight, his eyes flicking between them. He couldn't help but notice the way Valentina leaned toward Anthony, her posture relaxed in a way it hadn't been with James in months. "You're awfully chipper tonight," James commented, keeping his tone light. "What's the occasion?" "Oh, nothing special," Valentina replied quickly, looking down at her glass. She took a sip, avoiding his gaze. "Yeah, Jimmy, lighten up," Anthony added, clapping him on the back. "Not everything needs a reason." James forced a laugh, though his stomach churned. "Guess not." As the night wore on, James grew quieter, letting Anthony and Valentina carry the conversation. He noted every shared smile, every inside joke, every touch that lingered a moment too long. When Valentina got up to refill the glasses, Anthony leaned back on the couch, stretching his arms. "You've got a great setup here, Jimmy," he said, gesturing around the room. "Nice house, beautiful wife, smart kid. Living the dream." "Yeah," James replied, his voice flat. "Living the dream." Valentina returned, handing them each a fresh glass. "What did I miss?" "Just telling James how lucky he is," Anthony said with a grin. Valentina laughed, a light, carefree sound that twisted the knife in James' chest. When Anthony finally left, James stood at the door, watching as he climbed into his car. "Drive safe," he said, his voice cold. "Always do," Anthony replied with a wink before pulling away. James closed the door and turned to find Valentina tidying up the living room. "Anthony's visits are getting pretty frequent," he said, keeping his tone neutral. "He's your best friend," Valentina replied, not looking up. "Isn't it nice that he's so involved?" "Sure," James said slowly. "Real nice?" Valentina paused, glancing at him. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," James said quickly, shaking his head. "Just making an observation." "Well, don't," Valentina snapped. "Anthony's been a good friend to you. Don't ruin it with whatever's going on in your head." James bit back a retort, nodding instead. "You're right. I'll drop it." But he didn't drop it. That night, as Valentina slept beside him, James retrieved the camera footage on his phone. His heart pounded as he skimmed through it, half hoping to find nothing, half dreading what he might see. The clips from earlier that day showed nothing out of the ordinary, but the seed of doubt had already taken root. He told himself to be patient. The truth would come out eventually, and when it did, he would be ready. 2 days later, James sat at his desk, his laptop open, the footage from the discreet camera queued up. He had avoided reviewing it, telling himself that his suspicions were baseless. But now, with Valentina out and Sophia at school, there was no turning back. His hands trembled as he pressed play, the video coming to life on the screen. The first few minutes showed nothing unusual, just an empty room, sunlight streaming through the curtains. Then the door opened, and Valentina walked in. James leaned forward, his heart pounding. She wasn't alone. Anthony followed close behind, laughing at something she said. They stood by the bed, talking and laughing, the kind of laughter James hadn't heard from Valentina in months. His stomach churned as he watched them move closer. Anthony touched her arm, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into him, her smile softening. Then came a kiss. James froze, his breath hitching. It wasn't fleeting or hesitant. It was passionate, familiar. And it didn't stop there. James slammed the laptop shut, unable to watch anymore. His chest felt tight, his mind racing. The betrayal wasn't just from Valentina, but from Anthony, his best friend, the man he had trusted implicitly. For a moment, he sat there in stunned silence, the weight of the discovery pressing down on him. Then anger bubbled up, sharp and hot. He grabbed his car keys and stormed out of the house, not trusting himself to stay there. He drove aimlessly for hours. The image of Valentina and Anthony burned into his mind. Finally, he pulled into the parking lot of a small, nondescript hotel. He checked in, tossing his overnight bag onto the bed before collapsing into a chair by the window. The night was restless. James stared at the ceiling, the events of the day replaying over and over. Questions swirled in his mind. How long had this been going on? Did Sophia know? Was he the last to realize the truth? Anger gave way to despair, and then to resolve. By morning, he had made a decision. If they thought they could betray him and walk away unscathed, they were wrong. James sat at the hotel desk, pulling out his notebook. He began jotting down a plan, each step deliberate and calculated. He would ensure they felt the full weight of their betrayal, not just emotionally, but financially and socially. He'd spent years building a life, a reputation, and a fortune. If they wanted to play dirty, he would show them he could play dirtier. Later that day, James returned home, his demeanor calm, but his mind sharp. Valentina was in the kitchen, sipping coffee. She looked up as he entered, her face lighting up. "Morning," she said, her tone casual. "Where were you last night?" "Had some work to finish up," James replied smoothly, setting his briefcase down. "Needed some quiet to think." "Oh," Valentina said, her brow furrowing slightly. "You could have told me. Didn't want to wake you," James replied, brushing past her to pour himself a cup of coffee. His hands were steady, his voice even. He wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. He needed everything to be perfect first. That evening, Anthony called. James let it go to voicemail, then played the message aloud while Valentina was within earshot. "Hey, Jimmy. Just wanted to check in, buddy. Let's grab a drink soon. Feels like it's been forever." James glanced at Valentina, catching the flicker of unease that crossed her face. He smirked inwardly, but said nothing, deleting the message with a single tap. Over the next few days, James moved quietly, gathering information. He consulted his lawyer, ensuring his assets were protected. He pulled financial records, looking for discrepancies. As he pieced everything together, he discovered more than he had expected. Anthony had been helping himself to small amounts from their shared investments, likely thinking James wouldn't notice. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was professional too. One evening, as Valentina sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, James approached her with a glass of wine. "Here," he said, handing it to her. She smiled, accepting it. "What's the occasion?" "Just thought we could use a moment to relax," James said, sitting beside her. "It's been a busy week." Valentina nodded, sipping the wine. "It has. You seem different lately. Everything okay?" "Better than ever," James replied, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. How about you? Anything you want to share? Valentina's smile faltered slightly. What do you mean? Nothing, James said lightly. Just wondering if there's anything I've missed. She shook her head, her expression guarded. No, everything's fine. Good to know, James said, standing. I'll be in the office if you need me. As he walked away, he felt her eyes on his back. The seeds of doubt were planted, and he intended to water them just enough to keep her on edge. The time for confrontation was coming, but he wanted her to stew first. Let her wonder. Let her squirm. The next morning, James made a call to an old college friend who worked in corporate investigations. I need a favor, he said, his tone brisk. It's personal. Can you run a background check on someone for me? Of course, came the reply. Send me the details. James provided Anthony's information, then leaned back in his chair. As he waited for the results, he reviewed his plan again. Every piece was falling into place. He would make his move soon, and when he did, there would be no coming back for Valentina or Anthony. He thought about the life he'd built, the sacrifices he'd made, and the trust he'd given so freely. They had taken it all for granted, but they wouldn't get away with it. Not this time. The next evening, James sat at the dinner table, watching Valentina and Sophia as they ate in silence. Valentina avoided his gaze, while Sophia scrolled through her phone, oblivious to the tension in the room. James took a deep breath, placing his fork down carefully. Valentina, Sophia, he began, his voice calm but cold. I need to share something with you both. Valentina's fork froze midair, her eyes flickering with unease. Sophia barely glanced up, muttering, Can it wait? I'm busy. No, James said firmly. It can't. This family has meant everything to me. But it seems not everyone feels the same. Valentina shifted uncomfortably in her chair. James, what are you talking about? James reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times before setting it down on the table, the video already playing. The sound of Valentina's laughter with Anthony filled the room, followed by the unmistakable visuals. Valentina's face went pale, her hands trembling. Sophia's jaw dropped, her phone slipping from her fingers onto the table with a dull thud. Dad, what the hell? Sophia exclaimed, breaking the silence. You were spying on Mom? That's so messed up. James' eyes snapped to his daughter, his voice sharp. Messed up? What's messed up is your mother's affair with my so-called best friend. In my house, no less. Valentina burst into tears, burying her face in her hands. James, please, she sobbed. Let's talk about this privately. I'll do anything to fix this. Privately? James scoffed. Why? So you can spin some sob story without witnesses? No, Valentina. We're addressing this now. Sophia stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. If you ruin our family over Mom's little affair, then you're the problem, she shouted, glaring at James. God, Dad, why can't you just let it go? James' face hardened, his anger simmering beneath the surface. A little affair? He repeated, his voice low and cutting. Sophia, you've always been spoiled and arrogant, but this is a new low. Defending betrayal? Really? You don't get it? Sophia shot back. Mom made a mistake. People make mistakes. You're just blowing this out of proportion like you always do. James stood, his chair pushed back with deliberate force. A mistake? A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. This wasn't a mistake, Sophia. It was a choice. A selfish, calculated choice. Valentina reached for his arm, her voice desperate. James, please. I'll end it with Anthony. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't leave us. James pulled his arm away, his gaze icy. You ended this marriage the moment you brought him into my home. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? To be betrayed by my wife and my best friend. Valentina's tears flowed freely, but she said nothing, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Sophia, however, crossed her arms, her expression defiant. If you walk out, then don't bother coming back, she said. We don't need you. James turned to her, his voice calm but steely. I've given you everything, Sophia. A roof over your head, an education, every opportunity to succeed. And this is how you repay me? By siding with her? You're old enough to know right from wrong. Don't pretend this is about family. It's about convenience. Sophia opened her mouth to retort, but James held up a hand, silencing her. Enough. I'm done explaining myself. He walked to the hallway closet and pulled out a suitcase already packed. Valentina followed him, her voice cracking. James, don't do this. We can fix this. Please, let's try. For us. For Sophia. James turned to her, his eyes filled with disappointment. You want to fix this? You should have thought about that before you betrayed me. Actions have consequences, Valentina, and yours just caught up to you. He grabbed the suitcase and headed for the door. Sophia stood in the living room, her arms still crossed but her defiance wavering. If you leave, you're the one ruining this family, she said, her voice quieter now. James paused at the door, turning to face them both one last time. No, Sophia. This family was ruined the moment honesty and loyalty were replaced with lies and betrayal. Without another word, he walked out, the door closing behind him with a finality that echoed through the silent house. Valentina sank to her knees, her sobs filling the room, while Sophia stood frozen, her phone still lying forgotten on the table. James sat at a candlelit table in one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. The hum of quiet chatter and clinking glasses filled the air, but his focus was entirely on Isabella. She was everything Valentina had never been, honest, supportive, and kind. Tonight was special. They were celebrating their engagement, a culmination of years of rebuilding his life from the ground up. Isabella smiled, her hand resting lightly on James. I'm so proud of you, she said. Not just for your success, but for the man you are. James squeezed her hand, feeling a warmth he hadn't known in years. I've been lucky, he replied. Meeting you is the best thing that ever happened to me. Before Isabella could respond, a voice interrupted. Daddy. James turned, his expression hardening as he saw Sophia standing a few feet away. She looked different from the last time he'd seen her, heavily pregnant and far from the confident, arrogant young woman he remembered. Her face was streaked with tears, and her voice trembled as she spoke. I need money, she said, her tone a mix of desperation and entitlement. Please. You're rich and I'm struggling. Isabella raised a perfectly arched eyebrow, but said nothing, letting James handle the situation. He leaned back in his chair, studying Sophia for a long moment. Rich, yes, James said finally, his voice calm but firm. Foolish, no. You told me I wasn't your dad anymore. Keep that same energy. Sophia's mouth fell open, a gasp escaping her lips. Daddy, I was young and stupid. I didn't mean it. Please, I'm begging you. James' expression didn't soften. You meant every word, Sophia. And now you're here because you need something. Not because you care, not because you're sorry, but because you think I owe you. Sophia's shoulders sagged, and fresh tears streamed down her face. I'm sorry, okay? I messed up, but you're my father. Don't you care about me at all? James' eyes narrowed. Care? I cared when I gave you everything you ever wanted, and you threw it in my face. I cared when you chose to defend your mother's betrayal. Caring isn't the issue here, Sophia. Accountability is. He turned to a passing waiter, his voice calm. Can we get a table for her? She looks like she could use some water. The waiter nodded, and James added, Put it on my tab. Sophia's lip quivered as she watched the interaction. You're just going to humiliate me like this? In front of everyone. Humiliation is a two-way street, James replied. Remember that the next time you're on the receiving end. Isabella finally spoke, her tone measured. Sophia, maybe this is an opportunity to reflect. James has moved on and built a life he's proud of. You should focus on building yours. Sophia glared at Isabella, but said nothing, her defiance tempered by the weight of her circumstances. She allowed the waiter to guide her to a nearby table, her movements slow and defeated. Once Sophia was seated, James turned his attention back to Isabella. I'm sorry about that, he said quietly. She's complicated. Isabella smiled softly. You handled it well. She'll have to learn, one way or another. As the evening continued, James couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come. Memories of Valentina and the betrayal that had shattered his world briefly surfaced, but were quickly replaced by a deep sense of peace. He had rebuilt his life, not just financially, but emotionally, and he had no intention of letting anyone drag him back into the past. Valentina, on the other hand, was a different story. Over the years, she had reached out multiple times, letters, emails, even showing up at his office once. Each time, her pleas were the same: remorseful, desperate, and tinged with the hope of reconciliation. James never responded. Her relationship with Anthony had ended in spectacular fashion. After draining her savings and leaving her in debt, Anthony had moved on to someone younger and more naive. Valentina was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered life, a far cry from the confident woman who had once betrayed him. James, however, had made his feelings clear in his own way. He'd sent her a bouquet of daisies with a note attached. The message was simple: bad investments have bad returns. Enjoy the bill. Isabella reached across the table, bringing James back to the present. You're thinking about them, aren't you? She asked gently. A little, he admitted, but mostly about how grateful I am for you, for this life we've built. She smiled, her eyes shining with warmth. And I'm grateful for you. Let's focus on the future, James. The past has already taken enough. James nodded, lifting his glass in a silent toast to the woman who had shown him what true love and partnership meant. The clink of their glasses felt like the final punctuation on a chapter of his life he was ready to leave behind. The soft strains of a string quartet filled the grand hall as James adjusted the cuffs of his tailored suit. The large room was alive with laughter and conversation, the kind that came from genuine connections. He took a moment to glance around, taking in the faces of people who mattered, people who had stood by him during his darkest times. Nervous? Cooper, his best man, asked with a grin. Not at all, James replied, his voice steady. This feels right. Cooper chuckled. Good answer. Let's get you married, then. The ceremony was flawless. Isabella walked down the aisle with a grace that seemed to captivate everyone in the room. Her smile was radiant, and her eyes locked onto James as if he were the only person there. James felt a lump rise in his throat, but quickly swallowed it down. This moment wasn't just about love. It was about redemption and the start of a new chapter. As they exchanged vows, James spoke with conviction. Isabella, you showed me what it means to love and be loved truly. I promise to honor, cherish, and stand by you, no matter what life throws our way. Her response was equally heartfelt. James, you've shown me the strength of a man who refuses to let his past define him. I'll be by your side, today, and every day forward. The crowd erupted in applause when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. James kissed Isabella, sealing their commitment to one another. Later, at the reception, James raised his glass for a toast. To new beginnings, he began. Life doesn't always go the way we plan, but it's the unexpected turns that lead us to where we're meant to be. Thank you all for being here to celebrate this moment with us. The room filled with cheers and clinking glasses. James took a sip of champagne, savoring the taste of victory, not over others, but over the trials he had endured. Across town, Valentina sat in a dimly lit apartment, the sound of the wedding live stream playing on her laptop. She had heard about the event through mutual friends and couldn't resist watching. Dressed in an old robe, she sipped wine from a chipped glass, her expression a mixture of regret and longing. He looks happy, she murmured to herself, her voice tinged with bitterness. Of course he does. Sophia, now balancing her baby on one hip, walked into the room. Mom, you're still watching that? Valentina glanced at her daughter, her tone defensive. He was my husband, Sophia. It's hard to just move on. Sophia rolled her eyes. Yeah, well, maybe if you hadn't screwed up so badly, we wouldn't be here. Valentina's face flushed with anger, but she said nothing. The truth was Sophia wasn't wrong. Anthony had left Valentina with nothing, and James' refusal to engage with her had only deepened her despair. She tried to rebuild, but nothing seemed to stick. Back at the reception, James and Isabella shared their first dance as husband and wife. The music was slow and melodic, and James couldn't take his eyes off Isabella. You're staring, she teased, her lips curving into a playful smile. Can you blame me? James replied. You're stunning. As they swayed to the music, Isabella rested her head on his shoulder. "You've come so far, James. I'm proud of you." He kissed the top of her head. "I couldn't have done it without you." The evening continued with laughter, dancing, and heartfelt speeches. James felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life he now had. Every choice, every struggle had led him to this moment. As the night wound down, James and Isabella stepped out onto the balcony. The cool night air a welcome contrast to the warmth inside. "What's on your mind?" Isabella asked, noticing James' contemplative expression. He leaned against the railing, looking out at the city lights. "Just thinking about how different things could have been." Isabella placed a hand on his arm. "You made the right choices, James. Don't dwell on the what-ifs." He turned to her, his gaze steady. "You're right. When people bet against me, they always lose." Isabella laughed softly. "And I'm betting on you for life." James pulled her into a hug, feeling a sense of closure he hadn't realized he needed. This was his life now, one built on resilience, love, and the unwavering belief that the best was yet to come.